Caddis Maximus here, doing another review of topometric or long distance linear measuring devices. I did a small review and comparison of measuring tapes, but there's also another different way of measuring for when you need to do long distances. And these are two common types. They're primarily used in road construction as well as, a variety of other places. Particularly like a wheel type, because it needs a relatively flat surface. If you use it on gravel, it will get a bit inaccurate due to the nature of the device. And of course, a hip chain. A hip chain is just a string type measuring device. Both of these work in linear feet. This is just a big wheel, and then this is actually string based, and we'll do this as a two-part review. Anyway, this is a Keson MP401 metal professional wheel. They don't get too many points for uniqueness of naming their device. It does have a folding handle, so it's pretty easy. It just snaps into the side here. These Kesons are pretty nice when you do need to. That's actually pretty rigid. When you do need to do long distance measuring. I don't know why I'm so bad at remembering my words here. They do have a little bumper on the handle so it doesn't rattle around. You just flip it up and lock it down. Provides a bit of tension, and this is how it works. It's about 4 feet tall, or at a pretty nice comfortable position when you're actually down here just holding on to it by the handle. One thing to note is these do not like, the wheel type do not like to run backwards, and there are a variety of them. There are ones with small wheels for real smooth surfaces, but most commonly it'll be these large wheels. I thought it was kind of funny, I'll point this out, it is just like a bicycle wheel, and they even straight spoke it for lightweight. They actually don't do that for lightweight. They just do that because it is less metal in the spokes. Super simple device. They just have these 4 pegs. We can see here one, you can see one down there. And as you go along, those pegs, if we can, let me get this into a better position here. As we go along, the little pegs hit this little lever. And you can hear it clicking there. And it, come on camera. And each time it goes by, it clicks off a foot. And it's really that simple. I should mention that the Keson is pretty nice because it does have a pretty thick, heavy rubber. This whole tool weighs around 5 pounds or so. It's actually fairly weighty. And that helps to keep the wheel on the ground and keep it from bouncing around too much. And the reason they don't use a pneumatic tire is so people just don't have to deal with it, even though a pneumatic tire would technically be better in this situation because it would provide just a little bit of cushion so that it gets a little bit more accurate measurements. But when you're measuring the kind of distances like this, which can measure 100,000 feet, there's 5 digits on this display, that's quite a long distance. It's like almost 20 miles that you can measure linearly. So they use them in road construction when they're measuring out for lines and all the markings and where they're cutting, because you can't drag. Even like a 100-foot measuring tape tends to become encumbering when you need to do several measurements that may be over 100 feet, because one of these is also handy via the fact that you can do a measurement and then move to another place and then add to that measurement by just continuing on. The one big issue is this does not run backwards, so you cannot very easily take off. You have a spinning dial, but unfortunately that just tends to reset the whole thing from the highest number first. So it's the one kind of Achilles heel, is that if you clicked off a couple too many, or the wheel got caught and spun a little bit or whatever, you're going to have to manually count for it. And it would be nice if there was a way for it to operate in the reverse action, just so you could take a few feet off nice and simply. That string measuring device does allow you to subtract. A couple other little things to point out about this is it does have a pretty sturdy frame down here, which does help protect the lower wheel, because these tend to be just thrown in the back of work trucks. The actual counter that they use, kind of hard to see there, but it is a Japanese made counter, so that's definitely pretty good. And one final feature is this scraper. So if rocks or mud or whatever starts building up on the wheel, and this, or asphalt, which is notoriously sticky, this is just a little scraper to knock them off so that it doesn't bump around and its measurements stay relatively accurate. But I figure I put this video out there just to show what a nice one of these looks like. And for anybody who didn't know what these kind of things were, that's all they are. These are just big wheel measuring tapes made for measuring very, very long distances. You could take it on your morning jog and measure how far you jogged and then compare it with the GPS track on your phone to see how accurate it really is. And it would just be like walking your orange dog. Anyway, let's talk about that hip chain just a second here. And here we have our hip chain. This is actually Canadian made, so it's pretty decent, and it just has a couple belt loops. It's really made just to sit on the side of your body. And it just uses large size bobbins. I'm not exactly sure what they're called, but if you go to a sewing supply, these really long, I think there's like 1 or 2 miles of string on this. And you just get it from a sewing supply, and it's pretty simple. It just has a wheel connected to a counter, but since it is a wheel, it does have this distinct advantage to where you can pull the string out and it measures linearly. So instead of just clicking over by the feet, you can get in between numbers. So you can actually get measurements. Really, it's pretty easy to do half a foot, even a quarter of a foot. It gets a little harder beyond that. But you can also twist the string backwards here, and it will wind the wheel back, and we can subtract, which is also handy if you get the string caught on something or accidentally trip over it. Now, obviously, the advantage of this thing, even versus the wheel, is it can, in many situations, be much more accurate. The reason is obvious. You're physically connected from point A to point B via this thread here. And so that's one of the advantages. You can go on a hike on a real twisting trail, and you can just drag out this string and not only use it to find your way back, but know real accurately exactly how far you traveled. As you go up a hill, it'll compensate for that. You go around the bend, step over a rock, the string goes over the same exact surfaces and gives you a real accurate measurement, surprisingly enough. And it indeed also has a 5-digit counter, so a maximum of 99,999 feet, so 100,000 feet, or 19 miles. Now, of course, the big Achilles, or 2 issues with the big rolling wheels. One, you have to be careful not to go too fast so it doesn't bounce and skip over stuff, giving you more inaccurate results, measuring a shorter distance than you've actually traveled and not being able to subtract. The issue with this one is that the string is disposable. So even though you can wind the wheel back in situations where you need to do a subtraction, once you've unwound thousands of feet of string, you're not going to get in here and rewind it onto that bobbin. And so it's kind of wasteful in that sense. The bobbins aren't that expensive, but you do need to consider that. Over shorter distances, even like 100 feet, 200 feet, you could pull this out and wrap it back up. You do have to kind of thread it. I think it's kind of interesting in there that they're using just a crimp electrical terminal as a guide, but whatever works. This little thing here that's actually sitting, you wrap the string around this aluminum wheel with some knurling, and then this is just a spring-loaded arm with a little Velcro pad, but not the plastic hooks, it's the fuzzy side of a Velcro pad. But if we actually look, there's a little hole down in there. This is a toggle bolt, the top of a T toggle bolt, where you drill a big hole like for hanging chandeliers from the ceiling, and then you put in these flip bolts that compress together and then flip out. That's what they're using for this finger. So they're, using off-the-shelf parts, really, wire terminals and toggle bolts to put this thing together, big sewing bobbins. But it all works. All those are really easily replaceable parts. If only you didn't have to throw away the thread. Of course, trying to make it have the capability of rewinding in the environments where the string would get dirt and crud just really wouldn't work out. The big issue with rewinding this much string on a bobbin is, of course, you need a mechanism that makes it, that guides the string up and down so it evenly winds it, and that would just be ridiculous for a tool like this. Anyway, just wanted to bring a video about a couple of tools on how you measure real long distances. And I don't know if I mentioned, but it does have handy windows so you can keep it closed and monitor how much string you have left and, of course, your number. But a video about long distance measuring tools. Anyway, I really appreciate everybody watching and subscribing. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. Until next time, Catus Maximus out.